Hello and welcome to my talk 1, 2, 3 Build. My name is Alexander Pacha and I'm a software developer at Zülke Engineering. Zülke Engineering is an innovation consultancy. We also have an office here in Belgrade and I think a lot of colleagues are here today. And at Zülke I'm responsible for .NET enterprise applications and mobile applications. And today I want to talk about continuous integration for mobile applications, especially for mobile applications. And continuous integration for mobile applications is just continuous integration, but there are a few things that you have to take care of, and these things especially want to talk about today. And the main goals of this talk are to raise awareness how easy it can be to do continuous integration for mobile applications. I also want to advocate the use of cloud services. So I'm not sure how you're doing continuous integration right now, but there are services out there which work really well. And I'm going to show you a few live demonstrations. I will do it right here afterwards. And the main goal for me personally is that when you walk out of the store, that you want to use some of these tools that I'm going to show you in your next project, for your projects that you're currently working on, to improve how you develop mobile applications. So to start, a few years ago I was in Belgrade with colleagues of mine. We were on a training camp and we were sitting around a few computers and basically we were selling test automation and continuous integration heavily to our customers. We were trying to push this topic hard. And we felt the need that, set up a Jenkins server. And basically everyone was sitting there setting up a Jenkins server. Seriously, I mean, how many of you have ever set up a Jenkins server? Please raise your arms. Okay, yeah. So you probably know it's not that that funny. It's like you have to follow a few wizards, then you have to make sure it runs, and it's really tedious and actually quite boring. So the things you have to do is like check out that everything works and read some help manuals online. But you have to do it over and over again with new projects, and I thought that there must be a better way to do it. And everyone who's in operation always has to deal with the same problems, that once you've developed the application, how do you ship it to your customers? How do you manage updates, etc.? And I found a great quote that I want to show you. It's by Mr. Whitehead, and it says, "Civilization advances by extending the number of important operations we can perform without thinking." And I really want to leave this for a second. And you can compare it with driving a car. When you drive a car, when the first time you sit in a car, you have to think about switching the gear, gas, brakes. And after a while, you automate all these things and you get better. You start to look around, realize other cars, and you drive more safely. And exactly this point, the safety, is what you also get if you automate your build. And this is all about safely developing applications, making sure that what you develop is well tested, is easy to ship to your customer, and works pretty good. So before I dive too deeply into the topic, I want to just make a quick survey to see who of you is developing mobile applications. Please raise your hands. Okay, who's doing web applications? Okay, desktop applications? Okay, something completely different? Okay, like embedded software? Great. Hopefully, this question is rather easy to answer. What kind of version control are you using? Please first raise your hands if you do not use any version control at all. Thank God. Okay, who of you is still using SVN? Okay, perfect. So I still have to use it in one project, and hopefully it gets done soon. Who's using Git? Who's using something else, like Team Foundation Server or Mercurial? I don't know. Is someone still using Mercurial? Yeah? Cool. What delivery method are you using? Are you doing continuous integration already? Please raise your hands. Are you also shipping your application regularly on a regular basis, say per week, like continuous delivery, constant releases? Please raise your hands. Who's doing some manual integration and manually releasing applications? Okay, so I guess these people will have like a few pain points there, and I hopefully can show you a few things that you can take away from this presentation. Which tools are you using? Who's using Jenkins? Okay, who's using TeamCity? Okay, Travis? Yeah, other cloud services or other continuous integration tools? Okay, like who knows Bitrise? Okay, no one. Perfect. That's great. So hopefully going to show you a lot of new tools that you will see for the first time. And let's dive into it. Continuous integration is the practice of having multiple developers working on separate copies and integrating all of their shared copies into one streamed main line, to one repository several times a day. That's the ideal case. So you should have one repository where every developer pushes their changes. And if you take a look at this graph, you have a repository, and ideally you get feedback within a few minutes once you've pushed a change into the repository from some sort of continuous integration server which checks, has the build worked out correctly, are there any bugs, any tests that failed, and you can do even more. And why would you do this? I think the reasons are quite obvious, and everyone who is not using continuous integration will know the points why you should use this. First, you detect integration bugs really quickly. If you have someone pushing a change into the repository and the build doesn't work anymore, you will get feedback from your server kind of instantly while you're still working on the same code. And if you don't get this feedback, say you worked on a component and another component of your application broke, and you have no tests, whatever, until the next release, say 2-3 weeks later, and then you realize, oops, there's something that broke. It's gonna be painful to find the commit which broke this feature. And there is also one thing which is really important. You avoid dependency on individuals. So who of you has someone like a release manager or someone who's managing the release process in your company? Yeah. So these people usually have to do all the stuff once you do a release, like sign the application, distribute it, and it happens from time to time that these people go on vacation. And if you are dependent on these people, you cannot release once they're gone. So you really want to avoid this dependency. Basically, it should just be a click by someone to say, okay, the application looks fine, let's push it into the App Store. And you know, these are the pros. There are also cons, that things that they cost something. But in my experience, the costs for services that you pay for or for setting up such tools, such processes, are always less than the money you have to pay if you do not use them, if you do not have an integration server or something similar. So let's dive into the 3 steps that you have to do for continuous integration. 1, building your application. Building your application is the procedure of taking your source code, put it in an empty directory somewhere in a known compilation unit, and build whatever you wish to ship to your customer, whatever that may be. Could be an APK, could be an IPA file, could be something else. And the interesting part here is this known compilation environment. Because for mobile applications, this known compilation environment is a bit tricky. So it depends on the project you're working on. And when you're doing iOS applications, mobile applications, you do have to build it on a Mac. There is no way around it. You can virtualize a Mac, but it has to be virtualized on Mac hardware officially. That's from the rules from Apple. Same holds true for Windows applications. When you want to build Windows mobile applications, you also have to do it on a Windows machine. You might try to run both of them on a Mac with virtualized Windows, but still you have to do it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's not true, because .NET is open source now and you can build on Linux and use on Windows and Mac.
Okay, but if you build a Windows Phone application,
depending on the exact project you're using,
okay.
you can develop on Linux. It's just
Okay.
a longer way to develop, to ship it to Windows.
Okay. So great to hear. Yeah, there has been a huge effort by Microsoft open sourcing .NET and open sourcing the stuff they work on and the tools you can build software on. Same holds true for Xamarin. But still, in my experience, you do want to build it for Windows and you probably need to test it on real devices. So at least for your continuous integration, so it's easier if you just have two machines, or at least one build agent running on a Mac, one build agent running on a Windows machine to build the application. The only exception from this rule goes for Android. Android is the lucky winner. They're supported on both platforms because they're just Java, and Java runs virtually everywhere. And to make it more interesting, I'm going to set up an iOS application and Android application to build on a cloud service right now. So I'm going to do a live demonstration. Let's see if that works. Yeah. So there's a web service called a cloud service called Greenhouse, and they've specialized on building mobile applications, Android, iOS applications, and it's really streamlined and easy to use. So I'm going to start here, and I do have a project that is open source on GitHub. Let's see if that works. And all I have to enter basically are my yeah, com. That's one com too much. And I just say what to build, and off you go. That's basically it. It will now clone the repository, make sure it has all the required libraries downloaded, etc. And then it will ask me how to build it. This takes a few minutes, so while this is running, I'm going to set up a second application. So let's do the very same for an iOS application. Yeah, off you go. Yeah. And the cool thing about Greenhouse CI is that you have a free plan, so you can try it out for free if you have up to 2 projects. And they have not only running environment for Android and iOS native applications, but also for hybrid applications. That's what they've done added recently support for it. And it's just a few clicks, you start building your application, and they automatically detect tests in your project. They run them as far as it's possible, so unit tests are quite straightforward, but they also have an emulator that is already booted up, and they run user interface tests if you have any provided in the emulator, and will report the results and the final build within a few minutes. So setting up Greenhouse C is really easy. It's not that flexible, so many other providers allow you to customize more. But if you just have a small project and want to set it up, a build server, this is a really good starting point to try it out. So right now I say, okay, my project is called app, and do the assemble, save, and off you go. So my Android applications just started to build. Let's see. Okay, for iOS application, we have a few things we have to enter, as you might be familiar with. You have to provide a provisioning profile and certificates. So it's just quick. Oops. Okay, and off you go. So now we have 2 applications, and that's it. So these are the steps that you have to take in order to get your first application running on a continuous integration server and a service like Greenhouse CI. Okay, we'll take a look at these 2 builds later. Meanwhile, I continue my presentation. One thing you want to make sure when you do like continuous integration, some kind of automatic versioning of your application. And this is a screenshot from the Google Play Developer Console. I made a mistake once, so right over here you have a version number that's just an integer and you count up, and I tried to do some kind of versioning with year, month, day, and then hour, minute. And the problem is that once you've uploaded an APK with a number, the next uploaded APK must have a higher number, and there is no way of deleting an APK. So yeah, I started with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I have to continue with 1,000,000,006. So make sure if you do some kind of automated versioning to like find a reasonable version number. Usually the build number from the CI is a really good choice, and I totally recommend it. It's like maybe you just choose something like year, month, day, and then the build number from the CI, which you probably get from environment variables from any continuous integration server. Has something similar happened to someone else? No, it was just me being too stupid to use it. Okay. Next thing. We're almost done with building the application. We have to sign our application. And signing the application can become a bit tricky, at least for iOS applications. So for Android, it's pretty straightforward. You have to generate a key store. You generate it yourself. There is a debug and a release key store. You can self-sign your APK, you upload it, and you're done. But on the other hand, your users don't get that much confidence. The only confidence that you can give them is that they have downloaded the application from the same guy, from the same manufacturer, that they've downloaded the first version. But basically anyone can upload APK files to the Google Play Store. On the other hand, if you have an iOS application and you want to publish it to the Apple App Store, then Apple is really restrictive and rules with an iron fist to make sure that only Apple, that you run your application on iOS devices if they allow you to do so. That means you have to set up quite a complicated process of identity certification, which makes sure it's you, the developer, who's enrolled in the developer program, and provisioning profile, which links together an application with your developer identity and the target devices that you want to run it on. And when you do want to run it on testing devices, you have to make sure they're registered and you have provisioning profiles. And to be honest, this process is really complex and many people don't understand it fully, and that's okay, because there are tools and resources that can help you sort it out. Especially there is codesigning.guide, which is a really useful resource. It's written by the guy who's created Fastlane, a tool that I will talk about later. And they have an idea how you can improve this process of signing your iOS application. And the idea is that you have a shared certificate and provisioning stored in the repository that everyone is using on your team. So let's take a quick peek back to the things. So as we can see, the builds are now done. For example, my iOS application. And when I download the results, it should give me some IPA. Yeah, so I can quickly show it here. So it built all the artifacts that I require for basically shipping my iOS application or deploying it to my device. 2, testing your mobile application. Who of you has read Pragmatic Programmer? Okay. So there are a set of rules or guidelines that you can read about in this book. I really enjoyed reading it. I totally recommend it. And one rule is test early, test often, and test automatically. And I totally cannot underestimate the value of this. They also have a second rule, which states once a person finds a bug, it should be the last time a person finds that bug. You should create tests that reproduce this issue and then fix it, so to make sure that it won't happen ever again. So this is really important, and really make sure to test your application as often as possible and as automated as possible. Because when you do manual testing, I have a project that I'm working on. Every release we have a manual testing plan, and the problem is that when you do manual testing, every tester makes some different tests, uses the application slightly differently, and you cannot reproduce some issues. So he says, well, there is something that has gone wrong here, and then you just end up searching for the bug forever because you cannot reproduce it on the developer side. Or even worse, some issues come back again once they've been resolved in one version, and then it breaks in the next version. So you really should try to automate as much as possible. And we can also do automated testing on our continuous integration server, and that's the main goal that you should strive to achieve for. Automated unit testing, I'll show you again on the platform. So we had this project, the Android project. And for Greenhouse, as I said before, it already it quickly scanned the project and already ran the tests that are written there. So I don't have many tests here, but I have a few tests, I think 6 tests in my application, and they all ran green. So the whole build was green. I want to show you a second platform that I'm using for more complicated projects, especially for Xamarin projects, which is Visual Studio Team Services. I have a Xamarin application, and as I said before, for Xamarin you have to target, if you want to target more than one platform, say Windows, Mac, and Android, you have to have at least some build services. So I have my private Mac Mini sitting at home as a build agent, and I have 3 targets here. So for example, the Android target. And what you can do with Visual Studio Team Services is that you can specify build agent, which is the slave so to say, to run the build on. And I'll just kick off another build here, which will hopefully pass. And the interesting thing about Visual Studio Team Services, or the third provider that I will show to you today, is the idea of steps. The idea of steps with continuous integration services is the same as you have with Jenkins. So you say, my build consists of a few things that you have to run sequentially in order to produce the result that you wish to ship. And let's see how this looks like. The thing I really enjoy about this is that you have a graphical user interface that you can basically click and add tests. So say I want to add another step that runs user interface tests. And I want to run it on the Xamarin Test Cloud. I'm not sure if, is anyone using Xamarin Test Cloud? No, I thought it's way too expensive in my experience. But you could just say add the Xamarin Test Cloud and off you go. You get another build step. You have to provide the details. And that's it. That's all you have to set up for running your user interface tests on real devices. Okay. For the project that I'm already using here, we already have tests. So let's see how the build goes. In progress. Bunches in progress. So what I've set up here are two build steps that run NUnit, because Xamarin is written .NET, so you use NUnit. But basically, if you have a native Android application or a native iOS application, you get predefined steps once you set up the project, and you also have steps particularly for running UI tests and particularly for running unit tests on your server. Unfortunately, this is not very spectacular because once you fire up the emulator, it runs on my machine at home and not here. But yeah, that's sad. So one thing to say is that unit testing is pretty straightforward. You usually just run a command line, but you also should test your application from a user interface perspective, especially mobile applications. When you develop Android applications, you have thousands of different devices out there, and it happened to me already for my application. It's just a demo application for how to use your sensors in your application, your inertial sensors like gyroscope. Still, people downloaded the application and they don't have a gyroscope in their phone, and the application crashed or it didn't do anything, so they uninstalled it, rated 1 star. So the main takeaway from this is you don't get a second chance for mobile applications. Make sure that if you deploy a mobile application to the App Store, that it runs and it doesn't crash, at least not when starting the application. So do some beta testing or do whatever you want, or do some automated UI testing. It's tricky because if you run these things on an emulator, the emulator is slow. It might be hard to get different devices. Some companies set up their own device farms where they're running the tests. But I think it's too hard to do it yourself in a smaller company. So you probably need to use any of these services. I haven't tried them, to be honest. But I think you should definitely give them a go and see if they work out for you. I'm running my user interface tests on my mobile machine at home, on my Mac at home. But it's a great thing to do some UI testing, especially if you have different form factors and want to make screenshots for your deployment automatically. I really enjoyed reading this book, and there is another rule that I want to tell you. Test your software or your users will. That's basically rephrased from what I said before. Really, really go test your software. It is important. And if you don't do it, you will get 1-star reports from your users. Three, we're almost done. Deploying your mobile application. Now this is the thing that I'm not sure if many of you are doing this, but it is possible and it's not that hard. And I want to do a live release today to show you that it can be done pretty easily, at least for Android applications. So as I said before, you shouldn't be dependent on individuals. The release process, the deployment into the application store should also be as automatic as possible. So when you release to the Google Play Store, there are several steps usually available in your continuous integration service that you can use, you can configure. You put your data there, your app identifier and your secret key, and they will automatically upload the build once it's done. So I'll kick off a build for the application I've been talking before right now, and we will come back later to see the result of this. So the third platform I'm going to show you today is Bitrise. Bitrise is, to be honest, my favorite platform because they have a really nice user interface and a great support. And I have this application called Sensor Fusion Demo. And the Sensor Fusion Demo application has a workflow. You have a workflow editor. And you also have this notion of steps. So you clone your repository, you run Gradle to build your application, you run the unit tests, you create an Android emulator, you fire it up, you run your tests on that emulator to have your user interface tests being done, executed. Then you sign it, and last but not least, you deploy it to the Google Play Store. You can deploy it straight to production, but I recommend always deploying it to alpha stage or beta stage so you can first test it. So I'll just kick off the build, and it takes about 6 minutes to run. And while it's running, I've opened the website for my developer portal. Who of you has seen this before? Google Developer Portal. So this is basically the space where you get to release your application and make sure that everything looks all right. So you can take a look at statistics, see how often your application has been downloaded or how often it has crashed. So apparently this application has been downloaded a few thousand times, I think 13,000 times totally. And the APK is the binary that you're ultimately shipping. So right now, I'm sorry, it's German, but the published version that's in production right now is version 3. I have one version that I've uploaded yesterday, which is version 31. As I said before, I have this weird number that I can't get rid of. But right now, this 31 is here, and the automated build is uploading to alpha stage. So right now, there is no application in the alpha stage. But when we come back here later, after the build is done, our APK will be ready here, and we can do a few clicks, and it will be shipped to all of the users. Meanwhile, let's head back. So that was the Android application release. If you develop for iOS, you have the same game, but a different flavor. So this is the official way of doing it. It's from the developer side from Apple. You develop, you distribute it, and to be honest, this is really like tedious. So there's this guy from Germany, I think he's called Krause, and he's Felix Kraus. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Really? Okay, so even better. So he's developed a set of command line tools called Fastlane, and they really work well together. They try to take off the load that you have to do basically when you ship your iOS application. So once you have a new version of your iOS application, you have to upload, for example, screenshots, how the application looks like on certain screen formats, and you have to upload them each time you release it. You also have to sign your application, you have to run tests, you have to build it, obviously. And all of these tools, they put it into, also they call it fast lanes or lanes. And it's the same thing, you like have steps that you have to execute, and you configure it and they run it automatically. So it also allows you to deploy iOS applications basically with one click or from your continuous integration server with just one command line. You just say Fastlane, the lane you want to run, and it will automatically execute the steps. Who of you is using Fastlane already? So are you satisfied with it?
Yeah, it's much easier.
Yeah.
To abstract away the LEDs.
Yeah. So if you're, who's doing manual iOS App Store releases? Okay. So is it painful to do?
Since 2 weeks ago, no.
Okay.
Because you only need one set of screenshots.
Sorry?
In iOS 10,
Okay.
iOS 10, you only need one set of screenshots for all devices.
Okay.
So it's much easier.
Okay. Great. But I guess in the past it was like really not that cool. So from what I've heard, that people like took the whole day to release a new version, and then it took another few days for Google to for Apple to check your application and make sure everything works fine. So releasing an application is like really long process. Let's see if build is already done. Nope. Okay. So before you release your application to your end users, it's always a good idea to execute it, to test it. And even if it's just one guy who's doing it, you should do some kind of beta testing on real devices. Always. Never release without at least someone having had a look on like some sort of manual testing. Doesn't have to be a lot, but just a bit. And there are a few platforms that allow you to publish your application to beta testers. Hockey App is a great platform. It has been acquired by Microsoft, and you can also use it for free if you have certain limitations. Basically, all of the services that I'm presenting today, you can try them out for free, or if you have smaller projects, for example, if you run your build only for 10 minutes, then they're free. So give them a go and try them out. And Hockey App provides a few really useful features. So not only beta testing, where you can distribute your application to a certain set of testers that will be notified with newer versions and can sideload them to their device, but also crash reports, feedback, etc. And that's really useful. And you want to have some sort of crash reporting in your application because you're dependent on it. If the application crashes, you want to get as much information as possible. And what you can do with Hockey App, for example, is you can automatically upload crash reports from your application without even the user knowing that you uploaded. I'm not sure if you should do it, but I guess a lot of people just do it. And you can integrate SDKs from Hockey App within just a few lines of code into your application. It's a great set of tools. I think you should try them out. There are also other tools like Crashlytics and Fabric. They also have a huge bandwidth of tools. And for example, for iOS, there is this tool called Testflight from Apple themselves. It it's basically the same. You can try to distribute your application to those users, make sure it works fine, and they provide feedback to you. And there are more tools. I've collected a set of links and I've uploaded them on my homepage. So my-it.at, there is a blog. And I'm going to try to maintain and update it to keep it as recent as possible with links to resources that help you get started and make sure everything works fine. More tools and more resources. So hopefully I've talked long enough. Yeah, success. So there you go. And right now we should hopefully be able to see that there is a new version, a new APK uploaded here. So there you go. Number 32, that's been the version that I've just built. Here should be number 32, sorry. Okay, and now I'm going to do the release, and the release is just a few clicks. So there has been the version 31, and I'm going to switch to the extended mode. Let's see. So I'm going to deactivate 31 and I'm going to publish this one. So the new thing that will be released is number 32, and there has been a pull request that I got recently, so I waited for it to be released today. And once I say now release, publish it, it should be pushed to the store, and it takes a few minutes, maybe half an hour, and all of the users that are using this application will receive a notification that there is a new version out. And as you know from the Google Play Store, you will just update the application. So it's that easy. Imagine I had pushed a new piece of code into my Git repository at Bitbucket or GitHub. The build will be triggered automatically. It will be uploaded here, the APK file, and I can test or release it with just 2 or 3 clicks. And that's really how you want to do it. Visual Studio Team Services has a similar thing. You have release processes. You can specify how your release should look like, and you can even assign certain people to approve a version before it gets rolled out to, say, 50% production to your users, or another person who is allowed to release it to full production. So what do you think about it? Is it cool? Yeah? Okay. So, I'm already at the end of my presentation. I will have some time for questions and answers. So, to summarize what you've seen, and hopefully I've showed you today, is that continuous integration and continuous delivery is possible for mobile applications exactly the same way as it's possible for desktop applications or web applications. I guess web applications is like a common thing to continuously deliver and release it, because you've got everything under control. And it can be a bit tricky to set it up here, but I think with these cloud providers, they really tried hard to make it as easy as possible for you to set up and get it up and running. You have these predefined steps, you have to follow certain rules, and if they all don't fit you, you can still use your own Jenkins and do like all the scripting yourself. It's up to you. For example, if you have a company policy that doesn't allow to use cloud providers, well, then you have to work around it. But still, I think it's a great thing to use these cloud providers because it's like really super easy and they're not that expensive. They do cost some money, but in my experience, they're totally worth it. And last but not least, your users will love you and thank you if you build a great application that's well tested, released often with good new features and stable, basically stable applications. So your users will thank you, and I'm thanking you here right now for your attention. Thanks. So, are there any questions? Yes.
Question about you mentioned that some clients they have don't like for their source code to be uploaded or build accessible to any cloud services.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any experience with the Xcode integrated continuous integration server?
The Xcode.
In Xcode you have continuous server which can run continuous integration. So any experience compared to cloud services like in missing features or things like that?
No, I'm sorry, I haven't used that one before, but maybe.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please. I think that it would be a great time right now to use the last 15 minutes to share experiences, how you use this. I would really be thrilled to learn how you do it.
Okay, I mean, we use Jenkins in the company for building the iOS and Android. But yes, I set up for the iOS. I use the Xcode server. It was from the version 4. Now it's 5 point something. And I mean, it's easy to set up. It's easy to build. Even we build some custom scripts, so which you can, like in Jenkins, you can have pre-built or post-built scripts. So I mean, it works. It works okay. Yeah. Yeah. But usually in the company, when you're building for what is the main disadvantage on the Xcode server is that it runs only for the iOS. So you usually have the projects for both platforms, and then you need to have something else for Android.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So maybe your question was about particular features that you're missing, or is there anything, or just general? Okay, yeah. Because from my experience, all of the continuous integration services or tools do allow you to do some manual scripting or customization of some sort of. So whenever you're missing some feature, or for example, I had an issue with running unit tests of my Xamarin application on my Mac machine. So I basically just wrote a shell script to run those tests or do some automatic versioning, because you might have specific requirements how you want to version your application. You just run a Python script or a Bash script or a Ruby script or whatever you want. You just script it. And as long as you can script it, it works.
Also, what is good from the Xcode server, you can select multiple simulators and devices if you have attached to the build server. That so the test can run on several mm-hmm. OS versions, or several screen sizes, and all that.
Yeah. I think there is a tool from Fastlane that is also running the UI tests on different screen sizes, especially for creating the screenshots. So they are using your UI tests to generate the screenshots that they upload to the App Store. Any more questions? Any
for those cloud services, cloud services you showed, so can you do those scripting or pre-build or post-build scripting?
Yes. Okay. So, for example, if I get the screen back. Thank you. So, when you take a look at Bitrise, for example, you can manage the workflow. And what you do get is something like a container with root access inside the container. And you can basically do whatever you want inside that container. So I can just go and add another step here. So if I want to run a bash script, I can just run a bash script from my repository I think it also works with many other scripts. So if you want to run a Ruby script, you can do it as well.
In Xcode server, you can run the scripts in Swift, so, which is cool.
Yeah. So there is always the way, the thing of running it just from the console. Yeah. Any other experiences, some hard things that you struggle with? Anything that you want to share? So who's going to go out and try at least one of these services? Please raise your hands. Okay, good. At least a few people. Okay. So, if you have anything else? Okay. If not, I will be here for the next few minutes. So or I will also be around the next 2 days. So just come, pass by me, talk to me, ask me questions. Please tell me what are your experiences. I'm also really interested in hearing if you've tried out what your experiences were. So you also find contact information on my website. Just drop me a note and let me know what your experiences are. So thanks again for your attention.